as you can hear and see me, Cody, from just about 30 miles away from me. You can see me. Good to see you here. So good. Hello from Tennessee. All right, Donna, you win. Distance award so far. So I want to dive in. This is something that I believe that in 2026, I just feel like one of the things, and I'm not stopping what I'm doing as far as creating the more kind of evergreen topical videos on how to have a quiet time or how to do, use this tool or something like that, that kind of has the overlays and the text, and I have edited and polished and everything, but I just want more opportunity for me to be able to answer your questions and teach you things, or even address questions. I did one a few months ago that were questions that came up in comments, and I was able to go live and just answer kind of almost a Q&A with questions that I'd curated, if you will, from comments that I thought would be helpful for a lot of people, but didn't require their own video, if you will. So I want to do that. But when I asked in the community tab, which if you subscribe to this channel, then you can see when you go to my page, there's a community tab, and sometimes I'll post questions there. You can leave ideas. You can leave. Some people ask me questions there, and but it's a way that we can just interact. And when I asked if people wanted me to do more lives of what they would want, 71% of people in that poll said they wanted me to teach Bible study methods live so that they can ask questions at the same time that I'm teaching it. And so for today, what I thought I would do is I would just take the kind of the basics of how I started in Bible study. I'm not going to tell my whole story of how I kind of got to the place where I went from bored Bible reader to enjoying that. Maybe one of these lives I'll just do a telling the long version of my story. But that summer of '93, when I had seen Bruce Kuhn present the Gospel of Luke, and he challenged me to soak in a book of the Bible kind of until I really feel like I knew it. And that summer, I just took Philippians and I just soaked in Philippians for that summer of '93, and so much of, I should have had some samples over here of even the books that I've written, the Scripture Journey series of books that are all 40-day book studies of different books of the Bible. And so I thought, well, rather than somebody having to buy the book, let me teach you the process. If you want the guidance and my thoughts and whatever, then certainly you can grab a book. I don't have them for every book of the Bible, but the Scripture Journey series follows the process that I'm going to walk through here. And just so you know, this is not going to be something where there is a big pitch at the end, where this is kind of a webinar where, the 30 minutes is leading up to me trying to sell you something for 15 minutes. I mean, if you're watching this channel, then you probably know that I have a couple of courses. You want the courses? Great. I can put a link or something in the description. But if you even go into the description, I don't think, unless it does the automatic upload of things. Again, this is the first time I'm using this new live feature. And so anyway, I just want to kind of let you know, I'm going to teach the process, and then I'm going to be looking for questions either in the chat or at the end when we have the chat. And so one thing that would be really, really helpful for me is, because I can glance down and see the chat, but I'm not going to just go through every single one. But if you have a question of something that needs to be clarified that I'm teaching right now at any given point, just make sure you put 3 or 4 question marks at the beginning and at the end of your questions, so that my eye sees something very, very different when I glance down at the chat, that I know that there's a question that needs to be addressed right then. So my kind of understanding of how to study a book of the Bible from when I kind of first started learning to study the Bible when I was a kid, and people would talk about, okay, you need to have a quiet time now. And working through a book of the Bible, typically for me, it was a very go right to the verse or two. When I've been a part of other Bible studies, so often the approach to study a book of the Bible is to have day one be, let's look at the first two verses, and day two be, let's look at the next two verses, and day three, and it might be a paragraph, might be one verse, but it was this little bit by little bit by little bit. And what I found is there were times, whether it be through high school with youth group or through college or even after college, when I would study a book of the Bible and I would get 4 to 6 weeks after reading that book, and I would feel like I remembered very little. So I don't know if anybody else can relate to that. If you've ever studied a book of the Bible and then you just don't remember a lot, go ahead and let me know in the chat whether you can relate to that at all. But I think that a big piece of it was the approach, because I believe that the mindset informs the method. And so we're going to spend most of our time looking at method, but the mindset is important because the mindset we have going into it informs the method. And that is, for me, so often the first 20 years I was a Christian, most of the methodology I was taught was much more kind of academic, informational, was very, how do I learn some version of what does it say? What does it mean? How does this apply? And those are good questions, but those aren't the purpose. You can know what something says, what something means, and how it applies, and have spent no time with God. And I think that one of the things you've heard me say over and over again is that our purpose for reading this, which speaks to the mindset, our purpose for reading this needs to be relational, not informational. The purpose of going to God's word is to spend time with him, to hang out with him, to be in his presence so that he can reveal himself to us, so that he can show us where we need to change our thinking, so that he can encourage us, so that he can comfort us, so that all of those things, all of the pieces of information, whether those pieces of information are instructional, correction, in comfort, encouragement, all of that happens under the umbrella of relationship, not as the end goal itself. And so I just found that for me, so often when the goal was, okay, I need to figure out what it says, what it means, and how it applies, if there was a passage that was, maybe it was interesting, but I couldn't really figure out what the application point was to my life at that given time, then I felt like I was walking away from that bad at Bible study. I needed to remember that if the purpose of Bible study is relational, not informational, then there will be days that you learn something. There will be days where there is something specific to apply. There will be days when you receive comfort or encouragement. There will be days when there's a mindset shift that has to happen. And I think there will be days when we just enjoy the read, just like any other relationship that we have. Think of any intimate relationship, the people that you've learned the most from, the people who can challenge your thinking, the people who comfort you, encourage you, all that. Think of those people. Aren't those also the people that you hang out and watch a ball game with, or that you just share a meal with, or you go for a walk with, or go for a hike, or whatever? The people that we are in relationship with are the people who teach us the most and correct us. So I believe that the information comes, but the information is never the purpose. The relationship is always the purpose. So that is my foundational approach to how I study the Bible, from a mindset standpoint, and from a method standpoint. And I've used the analogy of the movie here a lot, to follow in line with the Scripture Journey series of books, and how I started to teach it now is that if you go to a play, that you look at the playbill, and there is the play, you know what the play is about, but then there are also 1, 2, or 3 acts to the play, and then there are several scenes within the play. Now, if you were going to watch a play and at the end of scene 1 you tried to discuss it, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. We'd kind of like, well, let's watch the play. And then we would understand from watching the play where those scenes fit. And so this idea of watching the play, typically when I'm studying a book of the Bible, and I really encourage people start with something short. So I recommend something like Philippians, Ephesians, maybe Second Timothy, maybe James, something like that. That I find that those 3 to 4 books specifically, they're short, and so they're manageable when you're learning a new process. But they also have fantastic messages. I believe there is a video on this channel about what books to start with first, and specifically that video is about internalizing scripture. Like if I was going to say I wanted to put a book to memory, I say, well, here are the 3 books. The principle follow the same of why I would recommend to study them, and the manageability of a short book of the Bible, combined with the fact that the messages in those books are fantastic, just ones to really chew on and meditate and internalize. And then also I find that those books specifically have a lot of the verses that you've heard out of context your whole life. And I guarantee you, if we took the time, I could share with you a verse from all 6 chapters of Ephesians, from all 4 chapters of Philippians, all 4 chapters of Second Timothy, and all 5 chapters of James. And I could give you all of those. I could give you a verse, and I guarantee you will have heard it. And you may not know the context. Might not know which book of it, which one of those 4 books it's from, or what chapter it's from, or what surrounds it. But I like it when people study those books specifically, because it feels like you're kind of putting flesh on a skeleton that you already know. And so you go, oh, that's where that comes from. Oh, that's where he was coming from and talking to that. And so it's really fun. So, pick one of those 4 or another short book. I mean, you could certainly do Galatians or Colossians or something like that. But pick a short book in your mind that you're going to apply this method to, and then look at the next kind of 40 to 60 days as here's how we watch the play, and here's how we look at the acts of the play, and here's how we look at the scenes of the play. And so the watching the play, what I typically do for this first bit is, depending on whether I want to really get it to the place where I know it and I've internalized it, and I even have parts of it down word for word, that I adjust some of these times. So if you're just studying it, then I think about 3 weeks of reading it. If you're doing 5 to 7 days a week, then somewhere between 14 and 20 times, you just simply need to read the book. Now, when I'm most books that I study, I'm going to be internalizing at the same time. So my general rule for a short book of the Bible is 30 times in 30 days. And when I do that, I use this Bible here, which, if you can see on the page, there are very few notes. This is not my study Bible. My study Bible here has a whole lot of notes on the page, and it's something where I find that at the beginning, when I'm first approaching a book of the Bible, I want to not be thinking about all of the details. For me, I've said before that I'm a ping pong reader, right? Where if I'm in my study Bible and I see a bold letter A, I feel like ping, there's a moral obligation to go down to the bottom and figure out what it actually says, and then pong back up to the top, and then read B, ping down to the bottom, pong back up to the top. If you're a ping pong reader, go ahead and put ping pong in the chat. For me, I know that if I have my study Bible, I'm going to want to look at all the charts, all the notes, all the outlines. I'm going to want to look at all of it. And I find for the beginning, if I can just be reading it, it keeps me in that relational mindset is huge for me, of just reading it and just understanding it. And when I'm reading that during those somewhere between 14, 15, 30 and 30 for me days, when this is the watching the play, I just want this to be so kind of ingrained in me that when I'm looking at the littler parts, I remember the context of everything. I know, oh, this is in the first third of the book, or this is in chapter whatever, and this is at the beginning, or this is at the end, or this is what's come before. And just like if there's a movie that you've seen 3, 4, 5 times, somebody can show you a scene from that movie and you remember exactly where in that movie, you know what's already happened, you know what hasn't happened yet, and it makes that scene that much better, that much more interesting, that much more powerful, or funny, or meaningful, or sad, or whatever kind of movie it is. Well, the Bible is the same. There are different parts of the Bible that should sound different. And I find when we read little tiny bits, we never um, we never get to that place where we really understand the tone and the feel and the flow. In the if you go to the video that has become the most watched video on my entire channel, so just go to my channel and click videos and then sort by popular, and it'll be it's called Two Brain Hacks to Finally Enjoy the Bible or something. But one of them I talk about is that it takes our brains about 10 minutes of reading before we naturally kick into that storytelling mode where we see the characters, hear their voices, we picture the scenes. If we read for a minute or two, then we don't see that. And for so many of us, when we're looking at just a few verses, our time actually reading the word might be 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And so our brain never kicks into that mode, which is where our brain needs to get if we're going to be really relational instead of just informational. And what does this say? What does this mean? What is this word? And what is this? And how do I apply this? And so that idea of reading big pieces of it, and when I'm doing it, how I do it is I use that physical Bible right there and I read out loud. So that combination of reading a physical Bible, reading a whole book, reading out loud, and reading it 30 times. So that whole approach to how I watch the play is that idea of excuse me, is that whole idea of watching the play and those four elements. And remember, that's all with this relational mindset. This God, what do you want to do today? That doesn't mean you're not going to see something to apply. It doesn't mean that if you journal afterwards, you're not going to be journaling about something very, very specific. But it may very well be that you're just what you find yourself journaling about, or taking notes on, or writing down questions about are, oh, I wonder what Paul was thinking when he wrote this. Or I wonder what it would have been like to be in the church at Ephesus or the church in Philippi when this letter came. And I like during those, again, instead of 15, 20, I'm just going to say 30 days, because for me, it's 30 times in 30 days is what I do for the watch the play portion of it. And most of the scripture journey books, if you buy those, just so you know, that they're typically somewhere between 12 and 15 days. It's usually the first 3 weeks of the study. And with that, I will typically not only read in the same physical Bible so that my eye sees it in the same place, because I want to remember it and carry it with me, but probably about once a week, I will grab a completely different translation. And so just so that I have a totally different view, a different look, I just hear the words a little bit differently. And then the next day I go right back to my primary Bible. And so that idea of watching the play by reading a whole book out loud in a physical Bible for somewhere between 15 and 30 times, 30 days in a row, with every 5 to 7 days, read a different translation. And so for me, my normal translation is the BSB, the Berean Standard Bible, but I will have during the course of that month, if I'm going to have 4 or 5 different translations that I read once, then I'll read, I like the ESV, or I'll read the NLT, or I'll read the CSB. And sometimes I'll even read one of the paraphrases, like the Message or something like that, which I would never recommend as your primary Bible, but as a way to just kind of add almost how would we say this in normal language? I have to find that it can be a really, really helpful if it's one of the 30 times that you're reading it. So that is, if somebody's got a question, I see somebody, I think Donna said, I read the BSB in the morning and then the NKJV, ESV, CSB, and KJV. Yeah, that's great. The Yeah, Cody, I ordered my Humble Lamb BSB. I can't wait to get that. That's going to be awesome to get. So that is the general. And as far as my notes, people ask, how do I note and do I mark my Bibles a whole lot? I actually don't mark my Bible a whole lot, but I have my tablet, so my iPad, and I've got my Apple Pencil, and I use there. You could use the built-in note-taking app, just Notes, if you have an iPad. I don't know if there's a built-in one for Android. I haven't had an Android tablet in a long time, but I know that the Notes app on the phone and the iPhone and the iPad has gotten better and better. But when I started taking notes digitally, the Notes app on the iPhone was super, super basic. And so I started using OneNote, which is Microsoft's kind of part of the Word and Outlook and Excel and PowerPoint. It's part of their suite. And you can get that for free with a Microsoft account. So it doesn't cost anything, and it goes across your devices. It synchronizes with everything, and you can have a digital notebook. Maybe I'll do an entirely different when I'm like at my computer and I can be, sharing my screen and doing all that kind of thing to show you how I take notes, if that would be interesting for people to hear. But during that first 30 days, typically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to come up with, how would I summarize this book in a paragraph? Like if somebody said, hey, in 30 seconds, can you tell me what Philippians is about, or Second Timothy, or something like that? Then those are the kinds of things I want to be cementing the storyline of the movie or the play. I want to be cementing that in my mind. So just like I will take a day each week to do a different translation, I will also take a few different days in that first watch the play portion of my Bible study, and I will do 3 different background studies. So when the background study, kind of getting some background, getting some context, and I ask, who is the author, who is the audience, and what is the atmosphere? So I look at the author, who wrote the book, the audience, who would receive the book. Was this Philippians to the church in Philippi? Was this Galatians to the churches in Galatia? Which, or Second Timothy to Timothy, my beloved child. The very different. If you wrote a letter to one of your best friends, that would be different than writing it to your local church, and different than writing it to all of the churches in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live here in the Seattle area. And so those would be different. So understanding the author and the audience and the atmosphere, what was going on for each of them. And you can find some of that out if you do have a study Bible. So there are lots of fantastic study Bibles. My guess is if you use one of the major translations, like the ESV, the CSB, the NLT, there'll be a study Bible. Just search on study Bible. But what I typically, I've got, even though the ESV is not my number one translation that I'm using all the time, their study Bible is just amazing. And it's so robust. And at the beginning of every book, they don't call it author, audience, atmosphere, but you get a lot of background on the time that it was written, and who wrote it, and to whom, and what's the theme, and some of the general. And so after I've maybe read a book 5 or 10 times, then I want to look at, okay, let's get a little bit more context in. And those are the 3 primary areas for me: the author, the audience, and the atmosphere. So that's what I do. I will make a quick, and I'll probably do another video specifically on study Bibles. But if you don't have a lot of money to buy multiple physical Bibles, then you can get this is what's called a filament Bible, filament enabled Bible. They only right now, at least, they're put out by Tyndale Publishing. And right now, as far as I know, they only come in the New Living Translation and the New King James Version. They might also come in the King James. But basically, it is a reading Bible with very, very few notes, but it comes with a free companion app on your phone. You can search filament on my channel, and I've got a video about it, but it ties it to the exact there's a QR code at the beginning of them, and you scan the QR code and it knows exactly what physical Bible, so that when you scan the page number, it will take you to the study notes. So you can use it as a reading Bible, but then it also can become your study Bible on your phone or your tablet. So there are ways you can, different ways, but from a reading standpoint, even if all the study notes you ever do are in an app or at Bible Hub or at Blue Letter Bible or any of those other other tools, I do believe you need to own a good, solid, physical reading Bible if you want to be able to focus. Because people tell me that other than being consistent, the number two problem that is most common and has been for the 30 years I've been doing this is the wandering mind. And our minds wander when we read the Bible. So I find that there is nothing more distracting than holding this in my hand, which is why I have it in airplane mode. I don't even have it so that anybody can buzz me right now. and it's because I know that it is distracting all the time. So that is the watch the play piece. I'm going to just see if there are any questions. Okay, there's a question here. Can you share how you came to determine that the BSB would be your main study Bible? I'm happy to stay on afterwards. That gets away from the methodology. You can also search on my channel, search BSB why I switched or something like that. And that's a much more deep dive than I would go into here. Tells you a lot more about the Bible. The very, very short answer is I feel like the BSB is a really, really good middle ground between the ESV, CSB, NLT, and NIV. I feel like if those four versions had a baby, they would be the BSB. So you can find out more if you want to go dive into that. So the second phase is the watching of the not the watching of the play, but the breaking it down into the acts of the play. That most plays have 2, sometimes 3 acts. Well, the way that I think of the acts of a book are the chapters. Those are those natural breaks that if you are looking at the book of Ephesians, it's going to have 6 acts. And it doesn't always break up like that. There are some times when you're doing something longer, like a gospel or something like that, where I would, if I was doing the Gospel of Matthew, then 5, 6, and 7, that's the Sermon on the Mount. That would be one act. And it's really there might be a section of a couple chapters in about where it covers several of Jesus's parables, and that section might be an act. But in general, I think of, okay, if I could say in a paragraph or even a couple sentences what this book is about, can I say in a paragraph or even a sentence what this chapter is about? So that I'm really starting to now work the way that God's wired our brains to work, which is from the general to the specific. Everything we've ever learned in our lives, whether it is a sport, whether it is music, whether it is cooking, whether it is the Bible, anything that we've learned naturally and enjoyably, we've learned from the general to the specific. And so this idea of watch the play, look at the acts, study the scenes, is built on that natural progression that we can keep the big picture in mind as we break it down. But if we start with the little, the big picture rarely ever just all of a sudden appears. And so with that chapter, the other in one of my books from a long time ago that I wrote, Falling in Love with God's Word, that is my step-by-step process for how I study a book of the Bible that goes into deep detail on what we're talking about here. Instead of the acts, the play, the acts, the scenes, I use the analogy of building a house. The whole book is built on foundation, then framing, then finished work. So the same concepts, but when I look at the framing piece, is each chapter, it's almost like those interior walls. You might have the foundation that shows you the shape of the house. That's the whole reading of the whole thing. Then framing happens typically pretty quickly. They're building houses literally across the street from my house right now. And the framing does not take very long, but that gives you the breakup of here's where the kitchen is, and here's where bedroom one is, and here's the bathroom, here's where the living room is, and here's bedroom two. And you can see that from the framing. And so I just find that wrapping my brain around a little bit more detailed version of the flow of the book. And so I will actually create in my notes a framing outline of where I would just say, okay, if I was going to put this book of the Bible into bullet points, that this is where I find this, and this is where I find this, and this is where I find this, and this is basically what gets covered. And oftentimes those aren't even complete sentences. Those might even just be a phrase or something like that. And so there's, there isn't as much guidance on this section as there is on kind of how to lay that foundation, how to watch the play with read it multiple times and a physical out loud, all that. This is really, okay, taking a chapter, looking at, is there one theme in here? Are there a couple? Are there a few phrases that I can remember these phrases, and just fitting that into your notes there. And then, and that usually, if for me, 30 times in 30 days, it's usually during the last few days of the 30 days or the first few days of the next month that I do that framing or that looking at the acts and breaking that down. Then I move into the studying of the scenes. And that's the more kind of traditional study. But just like, think of any topic that you know really, really well. So think of, again, for me, I love sports, but I also really love music and I love technology. I love, there are lots of different things, and I love cooking. And think of anything that you love that you could explain to somebody, kind of the overall, hey, here's how soccer works, or here's how music is structured, or whatever. When you already understand it and you already know it a little bit and you already love it, the more detailed you get, those detailed conversations become like those intimate conversations with a friend. That the intimate conversations with a person are the most cherished, wonderful conversations. But if you haven't actually gotten to know the person yet, then those are actually inappropriate conversations, right? Well, just like take any other topic, the detailed conversations, if you talk to somebody who loves sports, then the stats and the strategy and all of that is a really fun conversation because they understand it. If you talk to somebody who is a songwriter, and because they love music and they know how to sing and play, they can talk about musical theory and how to go from this and how to do key changes and all of the details of that. But if you tried to teach that to somebody who doesn't understand music, then that's going to be a really academic, heady exercise. And you can take any topic, and the detailed, in-depth conversations about that topic that you already know and love, those are really fun. But if you take a topic that you don't know much about and try to have a really detailed conversation, it becomes really boring. And that's one of the big problems that people have with Bible study, is they so frequently will dive so deeply into it and try to understand what this verse means or this word, or do a word study or whatever. And it's not a passage of scripture that they understand yet. And so it's really academic. And a lot of times it's boring and it's dry and it doesn't stick, because that's not how God's wired our brains to learn. But if you've read a book 30 times and you understand the feel and the flow of the book, then when you dive into, well, he's used this word a few different times, let me do a word study on that. How does that, how does that work? And why did he choose that Greek word over that Greek word? Well, if you don't know the context, then that's just going to be, this is like being given an assignment in high school English or history class. But if it's something you already know, then getting to know it even better is really, really rich. And so things like word studies, things like looking at common phrases that are used throughout, looking at some of the different people that are mentioned, and looking, people typically know that Philippians was written by the Apostle Paul, but people don't even really think about the fact that it was also Timothy, and Timothy gets mentioned a couple times in there. So, what do we know about Timothy and what's his background? And so, doing a little bit of a study on who Timothy was and what he had gone through and what he was going through then can really add a level of richness to that still stays relational because we're going from the general to the specific. And so I take some of those notes, and um, sometimes because I also know for me, not only am I trying to internalize it, but I know that I will likely at some point teach on something that I've been studying. And so I will oftentimes even take that outline, that foundation outline that breaks it down, the chapters down, and I will kind of copy that and paste that over in my notebook. And then so that some of the more detailed notes about the words that are in there, the people that are in there, the places, the customs, anything I do then at that point learn from my study Bible, then I can put those in the spot in the outline where it just makes sense. And so it's at that point that that last 30 days, if I'm going to take 60 days and study Philippians, for example, then I've got these 30 days that I'm looking at, that I'm watching the play and looking at the acts. And then I've got another 30 days where I'm looking kind of verse by verse, and sometimes spending an entire day just looking up some of the common words in that book or that chapter or those verses, and praying on that and meditating on that and turning some of those verses that are specifically powerful to me and that God, I feel like I really connected with God through that, then turning those into Bible prayers that I can be praying scripture and writing some of that down and spending some time journaling about that. And that becomes some of the more in depth. I can still be having conversations with God, but as I'm in the Word, I'm sometimes having conversations with Him where I feel like I'm asking questions. Sometimes I'm just thanking Him for something that He's shown me. Sometimes I'm talking to Him about something that I need to apply that was in there, praying through those scenarios where I need to apply it. And that turns into a different kind of conversation than I was having the first month, but still a relational conversation at the same time. And so then after the whole thing is done, if that's a book that I really want to get down word for word, then I will take that and apply some of the principles from that other course that you've heard me mention, The Simplest Way to Internalize, which is my process of internalizing. But I don't ever start there. Like so many people, they have their Bible study and then they have their Bible memory, and here are my verses I'm memorizing. But for me, I want to take anything I'm studying and put it into my heart and my mind in a way that God could tap into that whenever He wants. And so when people ask me, how long would it take you to memorize Philippians? Well, I'm not even going to try to get the memorization portion of internalization. You know that I don't use the word memorize a whole lot, I use internalize. And memorization is an element of internalization, which is about knowing the word. And and so for me, I'm going to spend 2, sometimes 3 months just soaking in that book before I even try to focus on getting the words in the right order. It is after that. And the beauty is, if you've already read a book of the Bible 30 times, if you've already soaked in it, if you've already been in it and studied it deeply and you understand it and you've journaled about it and you've been praying through it, and hopefully you've been talking to people about it, if you're in a small group or you get together with a friend who wants to study the same book, and if you don't, feel free to join the Bible Life community. We'd love to have you inside the Bible Life community and ask all the questions you want. And that when you've done that, then the memorization piece of internalization becomes tweaking something you're already familiar with, something you already know, something you already like and enjoy. It doesn't start with, okay, I need to memorize this phrase and then this phrase, and I need to get this verse down, and I need to add on another verse. And that's not a natural way to remember. That's not how we learn and remember anything. So that is my process laid out, and so I'm going to just see what questions are here. Any device I use, no matter that, will live sync. Yep, Cody said that. Which Bible translation is preferred here? I see someone mentioning BSB, and it can be. which makes me cringe. I'm not a hater. It's just not for me. Yeah, as far as translation goes, I've got an entire I've got an entire video on this channel on how kind of what the different translations are, how to choose, questions you can ask to figure out the best translation for you. While I default to using the Berean Standard Bible, the BSB, I think there are some fantastic translations out there. I am not somebody who says it has to be this one. This is the only right translation. If you come to this channel and you are from a King James background and you want to use the King James, great. If you want to use the BSB, great. If you want to use the ESV or the CSB or the NLT, the only thing I would really steer you away from is having one of the paraphrases like the Voice Bible or the Message Bible or something being your primary Bible. That the paraphrases can be helpful in getting a nuanced look at something, but they're not direct translations. And so I really wouldn't. I would make sure you have one of the solid translations. So I'm going to put in the chat. If you go to, let me see here. If you just go, it's on my channel, but the easiest way, if you go to this keithfarron.com/BS4B, which is Bible Study for Beginners. That is, I think, it's up to like 16, 17 videos now that walk through what is the Bible? Can we trust the Bible? Where should people start? Every video in that series is a specific question that I then answer in that video series. So if you're fairly new to the Bible, or if you just want a refresher, or a lot of the basics questions, things about translations, where to start, what books to look at, all that, you might even just want to, it's not one that has to be watched in order. If you're brand new to the Bible, then I recommend watching it in order. But it's something where you can go to that playlist and it will take all the videos that are on my channel and it puts it in the playlist of just the ones that answer those specific questions that I've been asked by people who are fairly new to the Bible. And you could go and you can just go, oh, I've got that question, and just watch that one video. So you do not have to watch, not one where, oh, in the last video we did this. And if you haven't watched that, you have to watch that first. It's none of that. So it just answers those questions. So Bruce said, you are describing how you do it. Will you be demonstrating it to us here? Well, that's a little bit hard for me to do because I honestly spend the first 30 days just reading the book out loud. There are what I would do is I would, if you go, there's a playlist on my channel, which I don't want to go off of this, but I think that it. I'm going to just see. Hopefully, this won't disconnect me. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. So if you go to keithfarron.com/Bible Hub, then that will take you to another playlist that is the Bible Hub Ultimate Tutorial. And that is how I use Bible Hub to do word studies, to do background studies, to get the context. And rather than walking through and recreating that entire thing again, I would just say, go look at, if you were wanting me to show you how I do a word study, or you wanted me to show you how I get background study on different ones, Bible Hub is probably the most common tool, other than my own study Bible, that I just look at what's on the pages at the beginning of each book of the Bible. When I'm going to go dive deeply into that, Bible Hub it's entirely free. There isn't the only kind of paid version doesn't give you access to more things. It just removes the ads. If you want to pay to have the ads removed to support their ministry, you can do that. But I used it for the first 10 years. I believe in what they're doing, so I now pay it just because I like what they're doing. But with Bible Hub, I used it for, like I said, 10 years before I ever paid anything, because everything they have on their site, every single resource they have, is free. And so that tutorial will show you exactly. And then I'm standing over at my computer where I can share the screen. You can see me, you can hear me talking about it. I'm clicking on things and walking you through exactly how I do each of the things that I talked about in the process here. So Cody says, just curious, do you, oh, hold on a second. I want to see something. No. For a second there, I thought I clicked on your question, Cody, that you say, do I use logos? I just started using it a month ago. I thought for a second there that I was going to be able to like overlay it so that people could actually see your question right there on the screen, like they did when I used to use StreamYard. But yes, I do use logos sometimes. I oftentimes don't use it a lot. For examples here, there is a free version that's just which is biblia.com. And it's either biblia.com or biblia.org. The video that I just released last week about my 4 favorite online Bible study tools, Bible Hub is one of those. Biblia is another one, which is the free version of Logos. Or if you have a Logos subscription or Logos software, you can log in at that and see all your resources. But I do use Logos. I do think it is the best software out there, but it costs money. And so a lot of what I share on this channel isn't about the Bible study resources that are going to cost money other than Bibles. But it's something where there's a lot that you can do with Bible Hub or Blue Letter Bible for the kind of the average person getting into Bible study. But Logos is certainly fantastic resource and is amazing as far as their libraries and different things. And one of my board members gifted me probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, a Logos, kind of one of their premium, like $1,500 libraries or something like that. And so I do have Logos and I love it. I love their software. But as far as what I show on this channel and what I frequently use with Bible Hub, a lot of times when I want quick things, I can find it more quickly now because I've done so many tutorials and shown so many people how to use it. I can oftentimes find it even quicker on Bible Hub. But Logos is fantastic. And now, even in the last 6 months, they've now started to add a subscription to where you can pay like 6 or 7, up to $10 to $15 a month. And have access to a lot of the things that you couldn't have access to unless you bought at least one of their like $700 to $800 packages. So, I use the example of it used to be that you had to buy the piece of equipment that's in the gym, and now you can just pay $30 a month and use whatever equipment they have, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars of gym equipment that you can have access to as long as your subscription's active. And Logos has now done that, and that's a fairly recent thing. Within the last year, it might be a little bit more than a year, but within the last 6 to 18 months, they now have the subscription where you can even just try it and pay $10, use it for a month and see if it's worth it for all that they have, because it certainly is the most powerful for sure. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. All right. Okay, everyone. Well, we have been on for a little over 45 minutes, and hopefully it's been helpful. But I don't see any other questions unless I missed something. But thanks for joining me. And if there's something else that you would like me, I love being able to answer those questions right away in real time. And so if there are some other specific lives that you would like me to do, then I would love your ideas. Feel free to post something in the community section. If you subscribe to this channel, then you can post things in the community section of the channel, and I see those. I'm notified of those. You can also just send an email to support@keithfarron.com, and it will go to both my assistant and me. And because I get almost all of my ideas for videos, for lives, for products, for books, I get from you asking me questions. So I will see you all next time. What is it? Cody said, "Oh, you had to buy a book package." Okay. Yep. Yeah. They've got lots of stuff going on. So logos.com, go ahead and check it out. Yeah, it's really, really cool, but it's not completely free. So, all right, everyone, have a good one, and we will see you next time. Bye.